The following is a special presentation on CW7 Arizona.
Welcome to Before You Vote. I'm Mike Broomhead. The CW7 special program is here to help you, the voter, understand the 2024 primary election. We'll be talking with candidates and data analysts to give you insight into who and what is on the ballot. Now, today on the show, we're doing an in-depth interview with City of Phoenix Mayor Kate Gallego. We'll be discussing her campaign for re-election. Now, the job of the mayor is a bit different in Phoenix, where other cities have a strong mayor system. She'll be explaining the difference in her role as the mayor of Phoenix. Then, Mike Noble from Noble Predictive Insight joins us for Tracking Arizona. That segment discusses the impact Arizona's water supply of the 2024 election. Do voters in Arizona believe we are running out of water? It's the show you don't want to miss. We'll be back here in exactly 60 seconds on Before You Vote. Hey, welcome back to Before You Vote. Joining us now is Phoenix Mayor Kate Gallego. Mayor, this is pretty amazing. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Let's talk about your run for re-election as mayor. Let's talk about the campaign. What are your goals second time around? As far as your campaign goes, what do you want the people of Phoenix to know?
So I feel like we're just getting started. I have hit 5 years last week as your mayor, and I want to deliver on some of the things we've started, whether it be protecting our water infrastructure, building out the transportation plan for the region, community safety, housing, turning Sky Harbor into the best, or keeping it the very best airport. We have a bunch of plans where we've passed them, and I am excited to see them to the finish line.
When you look at when you came into the office, now you've got the experience of being the mayor, anything about the job surprise you?
Well, COVID hit during my first year, so I didn't have that on my expectations. I had been on the city council, so was familiar with a lot of the issues, but people look to the mayor for all kinds of different roles. And, you know, during COVID, people wanted public health advice, which wasn't something that I necessarily expected. The job is hardest on the worst days for the city. So, you know, on days when we lose a city employee or something, that people are really looking from the mayor for, you know, sometimes people are looking in my eyes, is things going to be okay?
Right.
How do we come through that? And so trying to be strong for the city on the good days, but more importantly on the bad ones.
And we've had a lot of really good days. There have been a lot of good things happen here in Phoenix and in the Valley as a whole. When you look at the job of the mayor, has your impression of what the job of the mayor changed since you've done the job? Does that make sense?
I guess I've found there's so many tools out there available, and that people really care about Phoenix and help me succeed. But there are things like how we moved to transform the economy, where there's just been great partnerships. We want to be an even higher wage city, and so that's why I've worked so hard on things like making sure we have the best healthcare jobs here, and semiconductors, those chips in our phones, watches, cars. The fact that we're going to be making so many of them in Phoenix with very high jobs that pay better than the mayor of Phoenix. But it's been a partnership from the White House to school districts that's all come together. And that partnership, I guess, has been a little bit of a surprise, but wonderful that we, in these such divided times, can move together.
Can you explain the mayor's job? It's a little bit different than some of the other cities.
Yes.
But when your role as mayor, how is it different from the other council members? How is the mayor's role separate from the other 8 members of the council?
So in our form of government, we have a city manager that does the day-to-day, and the elected officials are like the board of directors. So the mayor chairs meetings and has certain responsibilities. The mayor has emergency powers that are different from colleagues, some appointment powers. When you are elected mayor, you're automatically on a bunch of chairs and different positions. There's some federal public safety thing, whereas the mayor of the largest city, you are a designated contact on some very important federal public safety information. So you really wear a lot of different roles for the city, but it's often to bring people together or to represent the city.
Running for office, being in public office, public service has gotten really contentious in the last few years. Has that affected you? Have you had that affect you in any way? And do you think it's keeping people from public service because they don't want to get involved in it when it's as messy and ugly as it can be?
It is hard. It's gotten to be much more personal attacks where people really go after you and your family. So, I've been raising a son while I've been in this job, and there were some folks who wanted to defund the police and talked about hoping my kid would be a victim of police brutality to change my mind on the issues. And, my kid was 2 at the time. And it's just, as a mother, you want to protect your baby. And those are hard moments where I just wish at least your families, could be off limits from tough political discourse. I think we want parents to run for office, and so we ought to say, your issues, you are okay for scrutiny, but your kids should be left out, and that's been the hardest.
And so many people that run for office do run for office because of issues that directly affect their children. And you can talk to people on both sides of the political aisle. Their reason for getting involved in the process was something that was connected to their children. What motivated you to public service? Because you, let's be honest, with your background, Harvard, Wharton School, you could have done a lot of different things to make a lot more money. What motivated you to public service?
So there were a lot of different factors, but if I were to say one, it was working in economic development. And over a decade ago, we were sort of aiming for call centers and maybe not high-wage jobs. At the time, we were the 6th largest city in the country, and I wanted us to aim higher for jobs that are year-round with benefits and where you can really thrive. And so I spent a lot of time complaining, and people said either shut up or do something about it. And shutting up seemed unattractive. So I first ran for city council and then mayor. So
how does your background in business and your education, does that help you when you are talking to business leaders that are considering a move to the Valley?
It has been really valuable. So when we were recruiting the big semiconductor company, because I had the background in power and water, I could answer a lot of questions, and they felt confident that I could deliver on what I was saying because I understood the details. The other elected officials in other states with whom we were competing didn't have that background, and so it really came in handy. The water background has been so essential because, as you have seen, water has been on the front page of so many of the papers, and just being able to talk about what we're doing in a fact-driven way, I think, has been very powerful. There's been a lot of misinformation from outside of Arizona, but also a need to do long-term planning. And I'm so glad to have worked in water before running for office.
I'm glad you brought that up because I want to, in a moment, take some time to talk about the biggest issues that you think the city is facing, and water is obviously one of them. So I want to take some time to dive into that. In a few moments, what we're going to do is spend time with the mayor talking about what Phoenix is facing, how issues have changed, what the biggest issues are. We'll do that in a moment on Before You Vote. Coming up next, we're taking a look at how Arizona's water supply will affect the election in our Tracking Arizona segment. Plus, later in the show, Mayor Kate Gallego is back in studio to talk about her look at the big issues in Phoenix. This is Before You Vote. Welcome back to Before You Vote. This is our Tracking Arizona segment where we analyze data specific to the 2024 election. Joining us once again from Noble Predictive Insights is Mike Noble. Welcome back, Mike.
Thanks for having me back, Mike.
One of the big issues for people in Arizona is water and having access to water long term. Can you go over the data on this and how Arizona feels about water and whether or not we're running out of it?
Well, it was super interesting. So I wanted to ask this question because you saw a front page article in the New York Times that said Arizona is running out of water. And then you saw the business community and everyone kind of here in the state say, no, we're not. And so my question was like, hey, what do voters think? Like, what's the perception among them? And it was actually super interesting where 6 in 10 of Arizona voters said, hey, we're running out of water, where only 23% said, you know what, we're good. And with another 20% saying, I don't know. So it was interesting how roughly a majority of Arizona voters saying, we're running out of water.
And I think the reason why this plays a role in the election is the partisan divide and how you've got to speak to voters on this all-important issue. We know the economy is a big deal, but if we don't have the water to feed the new businesses and the homes that are coming in here, how does it break down politically?
That's a great question, Mike. So what's interesting about water, this should be a topic that is, I guess, non-political. I mean, how much water do we have? Like, that should not be a question. That should be like a definitive answer. And however, when you look at the political divide, basically whether you're a Republican or Democrat or independent, but your political ideology, so whether you're conservative, moderate, or liberal, and basically the more liberal you are, the more likely you're to think, hey, we're running out of water here in Arizona. But as you get to become, moderates, or you go down to conservatives, you find that folks, as you go down that tier, that they're saying, hey, no, they think we're less likely to be running out of water. So it's interesting how this issue that shouldn't be a political issue, clearly there is a political gap between respective political ideologies.
Do you have any data on how important this issue is when it's stacked up against the other issues in Arizona?
Yeah. So I didn't have it on my last survey, but we do lots of surveying all the time. And what I can tell you is that when you ask about this, if you, let's say, give them like 50 issues, right, and say, all right, put ones that you're concerned about, right? And you could select all the ones you're concerned about. Water would test at like 95% because, frankly, again, we live in a desert. Let's not kid ourselves here. So people know water is quite important. So it is a concern and a fear among voters. And I think folks running for office should be wise to take that account when they're out there on the campaign stump.
I love this insight. I love the insight into some of the specifics of what we're looking at for the election, and I look forward to having you back.
Well, I'm glad you love the insight because I love your show, and thanks for having me, Mike.
All right, that's Mike Noble from Noble Predictive Insights, and of course, you get all this information each week on the show in this segment. We'll be back here in just a few moments on Before You Vote. Coming up, Mayor Kate Gallego is giving her opinion on the biggest issues affecting the city of Phoenix. This is Before You Vote. Welcome back to Before You Vote. We are with Phoenix Mayor Kate Gallego, and I want to take off the candidate hat and put on the mayor hat for a moment. You and I share a respect and admiration for public safety. Matter of fact, we've seen each other at so many events around the MC, and you're the keynote speaker. Let's talk about the bonds that were passed for more fire stations and equipment and police stations. When can we, I'm a Phoenician, when can we begin to see the fruits of those labors and those actually starting to happen?
So we are making a bunch of investments to improve public safety. We will see a new fire station every year for the next 6 years, 4 of them paid for with the bond, and then 2 paid for outside, including with Congressman Greg Stanton helped us get some money for that. So that'll make a big difference in things like response time, and we're able to hire to fill out those stations. We're also making some really important investments in our police precincts. And then new in public safety, we'll have facilities for the Community Assistance Program, which is where social workers respond to 911 calls. So what our officers said is, we really want to focus on more traditional crime and some of the long-term challenges like homelessness. We're not always the right one, and sometimes a social worker would be better if someone's facing addiction or other challenges. So we will also have facilities really for the first time for that program at scale, and that will let our law enforcement focus on more traditional crime. So that will be a huge win for the city of Phoenix. Our public safety bond passed by the highest margin, so our voters are so supportive of our first responders, and they tell me that that support from all of you who are watching really meant a lot to them.
Isn't it fascinating that, I used to always say about Phoenix that we are a wide city, we're not a tall city, but we are becoming more urban and more dense because we are building more condos and apartments, and the response time for firefighters and police officers. But the city of Phoenix was groundbreaking in the training of officers for mental health calls. So you have been, as a city, doing different things to improve in that space.
We really try to look at national best practices and invest in our people and our training. The big conference for mental health and public safety was in Phoenix, in part recognition to of what the Phoenix Police Department was doing. Our department is so good, other cities keep stealing people to be their police chiefs,
right,
which is a little bit frustrating. I'm happy for our folks that their careers are going well, but
yeah, they spend their careers here learning, and then they take that leadership and they go to other cities. Let's talk about transportation. Let's talk about what's happened with the county and why this is important to the city.
So if you look at why we have done so well as Maricopa County, one of the major factors is that we've invested in infrastructure. We, about every 20 years, have passed a regional transportation plan at the ballot, and it is time to do it again. We will have Prop 479 on the ballot throughout Maricopa County this November. All of the mayors worked together, and we unanimously passed a transportation plan, which is a big deal when you look at, we have very conservative Republicans, very progressive Democrats, independents, and we all work together on this plan. So it will do things like I-17 is quite old. Some of the ramps to get on and off are tiny, so people have to slow down. You get more accidents, you get more congestion. We'll move up to modern standards. So this is a widely supported common sense investment. It was passed by our Republican legislature, signed by our Democratic governor. So about as close as you can find to consensus these days. Nothing's ever perfect. But we do worry with the ballot being so crowded and it may be buried on page 3 that people won't find it. So please check out Prop 479.
And it makes perfect sense because I came up from a congested area in Southwest Florida, and I will say I love where I grew up. It's beautiful, but they have not been as good with the freeway system and the roadways as the Valley has. I moved here in 1995. I've seen a lot of growth. And if you look at the expansion, go to the 303 out in the West Valley, you look at the immense growth out there and what that's done for the economy. We seem like we are staying that one step ahead in many places. But you're right, the I-17 right through the middle of Phoenix, it seems like that's a logjam every day, all day. And I guess I can't imagine why people wouldn't support something that's going to make sure we keep a thriving roadway system and infrastructure system.
I hope so, and we've really delivered results. So this is what built the 202, the 101. We just did some upgrades to the 60 in the East Valley, which actually reduced congestion, so people can feel a better commute. And we're really looking forward to it. It's also some things like modern technology. Right now, some of the streetlights run by the city don't talk to the ones run by the state, which is the freeways, and to just be able to do basic common sense investments.
Let's touch on water. You mentioned it earlier. Let's talk about the importance of water management and what Phoenix is doing and has done to make sure we have the water we need.
Absolutely. So the majority of our water comes from the Salt River system managed by the Salt River Project, which is in good shape. But 40% of Phoenix's water comes from the Colorado River. That river system has been over-allocated, so the same water was given to more than one entity, and then there's a lot of drought and long-term challenges. So we spent a lot of our time working with our partners on issues around the Colorado River. There's some disputes with other states about how well Arizona would do, and so we are trying to prepare long-term for challenges on that system, including investing in advanced water recycling so our existing system can go further. We have a bunch of programs where if your HOA wants to take out the grass, we can work with you. If you've got a big employer who wants to upgrade their system to save water, we can help finance it. We're really trying to all hands on deck to make sure we manage our water responsibly. And then I've had to have some national conversations as well because I think there was a lot of misinformation about the water system in Arizona. So every part of Phoenix has a 100-year water supply. Unique to Arizona, we make sure we have the water before we develop. There were some areas that are not incorporated in Phoenix, particularly more rural areas that have real challenges and very small parts of 2 cities, but it got blown out of proportion nationally, and so we're trying to do better about communicating the planning that we do here, because there were some rough headlines, as you might remember.
Yeah, I do. Listen, I really enjoy the time talking with you and your perspective on things, so thank you again for coming down, and I hope to talk to you again soon.
Thanks for inviting me.
Phoenix Mayor Kate Gallego, we'll be back on Before You Vote. Welcome back to Before You Vote. Thank you to City of Phoenix Mayor Kate Gallego and Mike Noble for being on the show today. Remember, if you miss an interview or want to rewatch any of them, head over to aztv.com/vote. Next week, we're talking with Chris Steyerwalt, the host of the new CW show, The Hill. He will be giving us insight into what is expected on the Sunday morning political show. Have a great Sunday and join us next week on Before You Vote.